Hello, welcome to this edition of the EMS Spotlight. I'm Eric with EMSNOW. My guest today is Mike Buseman. He's the CEO of SMTC Corporation. SMTC, of course, is a good mid-tier EMS company, has been around for many years. Mike took over 2 years ago, or you said almost a year and a half ago now. So you're still at the beginning of this.
Yeah, I'm early in the journey. Yeah, and again, hey, good morning, Eric. And again, thanks for having me, taking the time today.
Absolutely. Listen, so let's go back to when you started. What exactly was your mission or the charter you were handed when you joined SMTC in 2024?
Yeah, I appreciate we start there because that's where the journey starts.
Mm.
Yeah, when I came in, maybe as backdrop for you and for some of the people, SMTC is actually about a 40-year-old, EMS mid-tier, as you said, company, with a proud legacy. So, when I came in here, my real task was, I think, we keep evolving like anybody needs to in this day and age, the company. And really the charter, I think, was around kind of taking a really strong company with a great culture. We had some things we needed to stabilize. There was a lot of volatility coming out of COVID, a lot of volatility with some of our customers, but, it was certainly a bit of stabilization. Really put in a little more discipline around operational excellence. Really then, and then build on, we have a great portfolio of customers, it was delight them, build off them, and then really set us up for some scalable growth as we go forward. That was kind of the
Yeah.
marching orders when I came on board.
Yeah. So I appreciate that. I want to dive into a couple of those issues, but
Sure.
just for the benefit of the audience, how would you describe SMTC today, footprint-wise and kind of
Yeah.
targeted industry-wise?
Yeah. So again, we're in this mid-tier space, so that's kind of the scale. Kind of the attributes when I think about SMTC, we had maybe the good fortune, good strategy. We actually had shuttered our operations over in China pre-COVID, right,
Mm.
literally right before COVID. So what that, and again, it was fortunate for us because, we didn't have to kind of come through the whole COVID era with the China footprint. And also geopolitically, it proved to be pretty fortuitous for us. So today, what we have is an America's footprint. And we have multiple sites in the US, up in Boston, Melbourne, Florida, out in the Bay Area. We have kind of a regional office, sales office, and supply chain office in Phoenix. And then the reason I said Americas is we have a significant campus in Chihuahua, Mexico.
Mm.
And to me, that's it's very magical for us. And I think it's kind of differentiated. We own that land. We own about 20 acres. We have multiple buildings there, and we can talk about capabilities a little later. But
Mhm.
that's kind of our footprint, if you will. The segments, and you'll probably go deeper into this, but we're really focused on really kind of regulated, complex manufacturing solutions. We're designed around low, medium volume, higher complexity sorts of solutions for our customers, not doing high volume, low mix sort of work.
Yeah.
And, again, maybe just to kind of complete the picture for you, we go to the market after five segments or sectors.
Okay.
And, they're in cloud and advanced compute, power smart infrastructure, aerospace, defense, security. And then those are our cores. And then
Yeah.
we have a couple that are really starting to heat up for us in the medical space and what we call robotics and autonomous. So that was a lot, but if I think about
Yeah.
the company and how we're positioned, that's what we look like here.
Yeah. And you mentioned the China thing, but you maintain an IPO over there still. Is that
Yeah, well,
correct?
yes, yeah, and thank you for that. Yeah, so when I kind of rattled through there, I was kind of talking our manufacturing
Right.
footprint.
Right.
Yeah, so in Southeast Asia, we have a great team over there. Some of them in Hong Kong, some of them still in China, an IPO, some of our front end commodity management, actually some manufacturing and design people. So,
Mm.
although not a manufacturing footprint, we have a really good presence over there.
Yeah.
Led by a long-term SMTC person who's
Oh,
wonderful.
oh, excellent. Excellent. And when I think of the segments you mentioned, I wanted to get into those. I think of kind of engineering-enabled manufacturing. It seems to
Mhm.
what comes to mind, and for the people working in those types of sectors. So how do you see the demand evolving in your core sectors there in the next year or so?
Yeah. Yeah. So, and again, I kind of made you go over to the sectors right away, but
Yeah, that's all
that's
right.
at the core, that's what we solve for, right?
Yeah.
So, So our three big ones. I'll start here. We're really fortunate. We are seeing really broad-based demand actually across all of those segments. So that's good for us. The biggest movers right now, and maybe I'll just run through them, what we call ADS or aerospace defense and security, is seeing incredible growth. It's probably intuitive that, defense is growing a lot now just with the world we live in. But we're seeing growth in two different areas there. We have kind of the legacy defense partners, the defense companies we all know about, the ones we've worked with for 40 years. But we are seeing a lot of traction with what we call the defense disruptors. And, there's a lot of these, and you're smiling, you probably know exactly what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. But, a lot of these defense disruptors, they're certainly serving the defense industry. They're certainly interacting with the Department of War a lot, as well as a lot of the foreign governments. But they don't act like a defense company. They're Bay Area startup kind of a culture. And that we're seeing a lot of traction in that space. And maybe if you want to pause, if you want to talk about that sector, we could talk about that before I rattle through
Okay.
the other ones.
Yeah, please. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's an exciting one. Obviously, it's growing because of what's happening. I
Yeah.
heard that the big conference here on the East Coast, the military one here, what began earlier this year, was almost all drones too,
Yeah.
right? That seems to be
Yeah.
the predominant platform.
Yeah, it is. And that's why, again, in our world, we're really, we got the legacy defense partners and they're important to us. They're great customers for us. We have long-term relationships. But yeah, the disruptors tend to be very much, autonomous vehicles, drones, the operating systems that go around them. And in fact, internally, it's kind of interesting. I mentioned we have aerospace defense security. We also have a segment that we call robotics and autonomous. And ironically, that autonomous, there's kind of a direct overlap between the autonomous segment and the defense because of what you just mentioned. So
Hmm. Yeah,
yeah, and
and
we're,
I
and
know
we're
that's happening in Europe as well. When I look at the EMS over there doing it, it's that same dynamic is evolving over there. So,
yeah, and again, you see it in the news, right? Again, you talk about the unfortunate situation that's going on, like with Ukraine, but it's a very different war report when they're talking because almost everything's talking about drones,
yeah.
right? In wartime.
Right. Just out of curiosity, I know that in years past, in order to do military, you really needed to be established within there, right? I'm thinking of the competition. It's become a very attractive sector now. I'm sure a lot of people who may not have traditionally done work in that sector as an EMS are trying to get into it. But
Yeah.
does it still require that kind of legacy kind of within the industry in order to be credible there?
Yeah, it's actually an interesting one because the answer is yes, but it also requires some non-traditional industry behavior. All right. And
Mhm.
certainly not being critical of the legacy defense partners at all, but they tend to move a little slower. They tend to be a little more nimble and agile, probably don't come to mind when we talk about legacy defense partners. So if we burden the disruptors with kind of our traditional behavior,
Mhm.
quite honestly, they won't partner with us, right? So we actually think we're in a really good spot because we've got the discipline, we've got the accreditations that come from doing like ITAR work,
Mhm.
all right, that is very,
Yep.
very important for defense work. But we also now have been able to kind of take that discipline and the systems of management and quality systems that come with that, but also then maybe underpin that with a spirit of nimble, agile response, which is what these disruptors require. And in some cases, we actually probably are almost there. If we're successful with them, part of our value is that they see us as their trusted manufacturing partner. We
Mhm.
actually are helping guide some of them through the subtleties that come with, well, wait a minute, you're doing work with the Department of War.
Yeah.
The Department of War requires things like ITAR compliance. And in some cases, we're kind of bringing those disruptors along with on the journey of
Mhm.
education of what that means.
Yeah. And those disruptors don't have a legacy of internal manufacturing either.
Yeah, they're actually really interesting. They don't, you're exactly correct. They don't typically, have a legacy of manufacturing. And They don't have a legacy of the things I just mentioned,
Yeah.
compliance, ITAR expertise. They have an awesome idea. They got a great idea how to go impact the market and make the world a better place. And that's their mission. Our bolt in is to make them successful on the mission, and some of what I just rattled through is part of our value to them.
Okay. What are you seeing in the other sectors there? That's always a good one, but I'm thinking especially kind of the cloud and the advanced
Yeah.
computing.
Yeah, so again, cloud and advanced compute, is probably the next one I would talk about. So maybe order of magnitude, we're certainly seeing double digit year over year. Actually, in some cases, we're seeing 2x where we were at 2 quarters ago. So we're at a run rate with some of our customers today that is 2 times what it was in December, 5 or 6 months ago.
That's yeah. So you must be suffering then as everyone else is on the memory shortage issue there.
Yeah, and we're kind of fortunate there also. We are, but where we're a little bit protected there is where we're at. We call that cloud and advanced compute, that segment,
Mhm.
CAC.
Yeah.
So that, again, it's driven by AI, it's driven by the data centers, all very, very logical. Okay. But we're protected a bit because we're not doing server blades, which are really, they're getting hammered, by memories and processors. We're a little bit more at the infrastructure around data centers. So we're a little more insulated or protected
Mhm.
from, and we certainly are seeing it, but not
Mhm.
at the level of the high-end memory providers.
Mhm.
Okay. And actually, that segment for us is really interesting where the Americas footprint I talked about
Mhm.
really is playing to our favor, okay?
Okay.
Because, we have the US sites, as I talked about, but that Mexico campus solution in Chihuahua is proven to be a really, really good
Mhm.
tool in our toolbox. Because what it does, it clearly gives a lower cost solution, because of the labor arbitrage, but it really is helping us provide the lowest total cost solutions to these customers who want to
Mhm.
get to the US market as an end market, but we can manufacture in Mexico, under the umbrella of the USMCA trade agreement,
Mhm.
provide them a really low cost solution, leveraging both lower cost labor, as well as with kind of what we call a tariff engineered solution for them, to get product to the US. So anyway, cloud advanced compute is really good for us with this
Yeah.
America's footprint.
Yeah. And then the third big one, would that be the power and smart
Yep.
infrastructure?
Exactly, exactly. And that one, again, very kind of similar to cloud and advanced compute, that America's footprint. I won't repeat myself. It
Yeah.
plays really well with what our partners there are looking for.
Mhm.
We do provide, partnered solutions for three of the largest metering companies, in the US.
Yeah.
So we're positioned really, really well in that
Mhm.
power and smart infrastructure space.
Mhm.
And again, that combo that we have of a US and a Mexico footprint, it's really playing to our favor right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And then if I think back to what you were saying about your footprint, I think, like what you have in Fremont is kind of an NPI center. So you have you have the big thing in Mexico, obviously, but then you
Yep.
have you're spread across the United States very nicely and having kind of smaller facilities very engaged with kind of the industries in which they operate
Yeah.
or
And
regions, I mean. So,
oh no, sorry, Eric, go ahead.
no, I said I meant within the regions that they are situated. So,
No, you nailed it. You nailed it. And again, you know what it's like. There are customers who want proximity, right,
yeah.
to their design teams, to their start points, to their engage points. Part of you asked us about kind of our value prop earlier. One of
Hmm.
the things I've really been driving here is, kind of a standard work approach that lets us be transportable between sites. So not to get overly kind of pedantic about it, but we
Yeah.
talk about if we're systemic, scalable, sustainable, we can move things between sites very easily.
Yeah.
Okay. Because no matter how smart we are, partnered up with our customers, the world continues to change around us, right?
Hmm.
And a year ago, when I almost hate to say it out loud, but a year ago, when tariffs, every morning you woke up to see what the latest tariff update was, the ability to be kind of nimble and move between sites and between countries, regions was really, really important. And it was part of our value prop.
Yeah.
Several of our customers, we moved them from one side of the border to one other manufacturing site, and some of them we moved them back across the border, just depending on, the kind of, I'll say, the tariff update of the
Yeah.
week.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, and I think about that. It seems like speed, especially, is a core differentiator these days, right? That ability to move very quickly. And that requires operational excellence and operational nimbleness and flexibility. So what are your priorities in that area, for operationally for SMTC right now?
Yeah, so operational excellence is one of my favorite things to talk about. You probably know from our past conversations, so thanks
Sure.
for teeing it up. Because at the end of the day, that's what we do. We
Yeah.
provide solutions for our customers. But what's going on? The factory floors themselves. We're doing a lot of things there. Looking at additional automation, looking at points of automation. But when I think about the priorities now under the operational excellence space, probably now more than ever, the dialogue starts with the supply chain and this
Hmm.
and the priority there. Okay. And so we're putting a lot of energy into our planning tools, into our SIOP methods. We talk a lot about, success here is we have all the material we need at the right time, at the right place, but not too much of it. And so SIOP is a huge focus for us right now.
Hmm.
And then you layer in the dynamic you mentioned a few minutes ago about, again, it's not a static world.
Yeah.
The supply chain itself is changing. So we
Yeah.
have to keep thinking about lead times, things going allocation, memories, is thing number one on
Yeah.
people's minds now. So that's a huge priority. Um, the second priority that we're really honed in on now is around working capital and being very responsible. We are a working capital intensive industry. So back to the right material at the right time, at the right place for our customers. That interaction between the demand of the customer, our planning, SIOP activities, and then our partnerships with our extended supply chain partners, that's a multi-factor equation around working capital. So
Hmm.
we continue to scale, grow the business, make the investments here that we need to make.
Yeah.
And then the third thing, and I'm throwing a lot at you, you can
That's all right.
we can go in deeper on any of them.
Yeah.
The third thing that we're really focused on now is, and actually I usually lead with this one because it's all about the team and our people. Okay. So, attracting talent, retaining talent, and probably more than ever, developing talent. I,
Hmm.
I personally think our industry is it's kind of aging out a bit. And a lot of people who grew up in the industry, they're kind of done, right? They've said, I've had enough, I'm retiring. And so one of our big focus areas is we attract talent now. What makes it appealing to come into the industry? And again, more than ever now, I think we can't necessarily just go steal from each other or go hire, someone who's got 30 years experience. So we're hiring a lot of people who've got 3, 5 years experience. And then, we're really working hard on how we develop them into the
Hmm.
organization.
Yeah. No, that's important. I was going to follow up on that, so maybe I'll jump into that one here because that is the ongoing challenge, and it's a higher level as I understand it, right? I mean, we've always talked about we're automating, which means, fewer people needed on the lines in many functions. If we do the warehouse, you have fewer people back there if you're automating all of that, right? But at the same time, it's the critical differentiator for everybody is how good are their people and using all these great tools. So, it really is bringing in. So I like what you're saying, bringing in younger people with less experience and really developing them to be able to rise to the occasion.
And we've done to me, there's nothing more important, all right?
Yeah.
Because again, I say it to my team, buildings are buildings, equipment's equipment. But that's not what differentiates. It's what you do with those buildings and the equipment. And that comes down, to the people and how we enable them. So we talk a lot here, Eric, about employee engagement, and that kind of starts from, what's on our team's minds? What are they telling us is most important to them? And it's not an HR initiative, it's typically chartered and partnered up with
Hmm.
the HR team, but really employee engagement, it's an enabler to the business, and again, it's about attracting key people, it's about retaining them. It's
Yeah.
about helping them increase their productivity. It's helping them with their employee experience. And ultimately, it impacts the customer experience. So we talk a lot about the employee engagement and what we're doing here.
Yeah. Now, I do want to tip my hat to you because I did see that you last year, SMTC was recognized by Frost and Sullivan
Yeah.
as, if I get this right, for best practices in the global mid-tier electronic manufacturing industry. So, And some of that, and I was reading some of it, really highlighted exactly what we're talking about here, the culture within the company and the focus on the people.
First off, I'm going to compliment you because that rolled off your tongue, and that's a mouthful. That award is a mouthful. So,
Yeah, it's written down right here, Mike.
well played. No, but seriously, we're actually quite proud of that, and we actually share that with the team here. And to me, that does it kind of plays back that the things we're doing, are directionally correct. So, the award's awesome. I think what's more important than the award itself is that it's recognizing the things that you and I are just talking about here. Okay. And we've got a great training department. We have a new leader of our training. Kind of the learning and development leader joined us just over a year ago. He's kind of taken us to another level there in the energy around that. We're doing a lot of programs internally to make the learning not overwhelming, but make it rewarding to people as they go.
Mm,
So it's not, oh my God, you got to do 40 hours of training before you feel like you achieve something. I'm a big fan of incremental improvements and
mhm.
incremental learning. So we've kind of, layered that in to our learning management systems. And again, I can go on and on and on about this one
Yeah,
if you would like to.
yeah. Well, no, I also wanted to ask just about the how you're using automation data and digital tools, right?
Sure.
I haven't mentioned AI yet in this interview, which is amazing. We're 20 minutes in, but I mean, that's the buzzword everywhere. But it's more than just that, right? It is all of those tools and the automation, everything that you're doing. How is SMTC using those to improve your performance?
Yeah, I was smiling when you said it. We actually had a board meeting yesterday, and we didn't
Hmm.
make it through the board meeting without talking about AI
Yeah,
either. So no, it's and again, it's a real world. It's gone from being yeah, that's kind of fascinating to really impactful, right?
yeah.
So we're looking at it now, kind of the automation data, digital tool sets. It's interesting. Back to the priorities,
Hmm.
we are looking at three or four areas. The first one's probably the one that we're furthest along. But when you look at the demand planning, or again the SIOP
Yeah.
methodologies there, again we're just by definition we're fairly complex, right? We've got 100 customers, we got thousands of suppliers, we have hundreds of thousands of part numbers. And every one of those customers has their own demand plan, and the
Yeah.
model that we're in here.
Yeah.
So our ability to kind of iterate and do scenarios
Hmm.
around, hey, all these different customers want these different things this week, and back to kind of being disciplined around our working capital, that's probably the space we're looking the most. We have some really good tool sets now that
Hmm.
allow us to do scenario planning, kind of what if planning.
Yes.
So if a customer says, I want more, I want less, we can very nimble
Yeah.
approach, answer their question, and make a good decision here. That's probably at the forefront of what we're doing.
Mhm.
We are looking at things like, some of it sounds mundane, but even the things like contractual language and what we call our services agreements.
Yeah. Yeah.
It sounds mundane, but I mean, it's hard work. We've got some service agreements are 50 or 70 pages long. You try to grind through those. There's much more efficient ways to do that. So
Hmm.
we're looking there. And then the third area that we're really starting to see some benefits is in the financial space. And you think about all the FP&A, the planning and the analysis, because on the front end we do the scenarios of let's make decisions. All right.
Yeah.
We also then need to go look at not just from a supply chain and service to customers, but financially and working capital. What are the implications for us and our suppliers and our customers? So that's another space that we're earlier in the journey there, but we're going to be putting a lot of energy into that as we go forward.
Yeah. So related to all that, I guess I want to ask about the customer side. Kind of
Sure.
what are the challenges that your customers seem to be expressing most often to you these days? And then how are you positioning yourself with these tools to address that?
Yeah, so I think the biggest things that our customers are worried about, and I've said the words a couple times already.
Hmm.
One is certainly they're worried about the geopolitical situation, both personally, there's some serious things going on in the world, but then from a commercial or business perspective, how do those different geopolitical dynamics, tariffs, war
Hmm.
activities impact them? So what they need from us is the ability to be flexible and nimble and help them respond when the world changes. So that's literally almost the first thing in every conversation is, how can we, what are I talk about our degrees of freedom to help them. Okay. Can we help them with trade? Can we help them with trade compliance? Can we help them with tariff engineering? Can we help them with moving manufacturing around between regions?
Mhm.
That clearly is, I think, number one. Right behind that, though, becomes the supply chain. Okay. And
Right.
everything from availability of material to, again, the tariffs have upped the complexity around supply chain quite a bit. So the one I haven't said yet is country of origin, right? So the
Right.
country of origin conversation, of in the supply chain, what's the country of origin? That's a big topic, and I'll come back to that one maybe in just a minute. And then
Mhm.
I think the third thing is, I think that they want to go faster. Everybody wants to go faster, and you already mentioned that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
if I go cycle back real quick on the country of origin one,
Yes.
that one is, we're seeing everything from certainly from tariffs. The country of origin has become much more important, right? Because we certainly need to be as critical that we are compliant, with
Hmm.
all tariff regulations. And part of that is just knowing the country of origin. To be compliant, you got to know the country of origin of the material. So that's kind of the first thing. The second thing is, we're seeing some customers now back in that defense conversation we were talking about 20 minutes ago.
Hmm.
We're seeing some customers now who will say outright they will allow no material from certain countries on their product. Okay.
Hmm.
So part of it's a tariff, part of it is just an outright compliance with the customer's requirements. All right. So that's the thing that they're asking us. They're definitely getting deeper into that. It's much more important to them today than it was 2 years ago.
Hmm. Yeah. So yeah, I'm always interested in what it's going to take to grow the pie, right? So to speak. The total available market is what it is, and how does EMS grow within that? It,
Yeah.
and as I'm hearing you speak about these issues and the challenges, does this environment make it more difficult for OEMs who maybe haven't outsourced as much or haven't maybe outsourced at all to start engaging with EMS, or are you guys really proving to be the experts that can really be leveraged to the benefit of those customers?
I think it's more the latter. I was just talking to a colleague of mine last week, and 15 years ago, 20
Hmm.
years ago, an engaged conversation for someone who was looking to outsource really started with, tell me about your surface mount lines, tell me about your technical capabilities. And you know that, Eric, you know what
Yeah,
I'm talking
yeah,
about. That's not the conversation anymore. All right. That's table stakes. Of course you can build it.
mhm,
Now there's some subtleties there, but
mhm,
really the conversations now that someone who's trying to decide, at least for the way I look at it, they're
right.
asking questions about how do you run your business? Are you nimble? Are you agile? Tell me about your trade compliance systems. Do you understand country of origin? Do you have ITAR capability? So I think the things that they need from us, ultimately they need us to build product, run a supply chain and build product. But I think the things that they're really worried about or that they think differentiate, they're very different than they were 15 years ago.
Mm. Oh, I appreciate that. That's good insight. Because I could see where somebody might be anxious to do it, but then look at the current situation and say, "Ooh, maybe I need to hit pause on that for a little bit." So,
Yeah,
uh,
and I think you're right. First off, you're not incorrect. You're right. But again, I think I talk about us being the trusted partner of choice or the manufacturer of choice. That's how I think we earn confidence because it is. It's always been nerve-wracking for someone to outsource. It's probably more nerve-wracking now than ever for a lot of the reasons we're talking about. So, our job is to one, be competent, two, to represent that, give them comfort that they can trust us and that we'll execute on their behalf. And then
yeah,
three, to go do that. That's our
yeah,
job.
yeah. And it's always the best testimonial of your current customers are going to tell their colleagues,
Yep.
check these guys out. They handle us exceptionally well.
I agree. And we also take great pride. We're very fortunate that in I call our logos, the partners, the customers we have a lot of long-term customers and partners. And I mean 10-year, 20-year kind of customers.
Mhm.
And so I think those are the kind of customers that will pass your name on to another colleague. But the fact that they've stayed with us, I mean, I think it's a credit to them that they're true partners. And hopefully it says something about SMTC that we've done our job also.
Yeah. Listen, just to kind of wrap this up a bit, how do you see, we're almost halfway through 2026. How do you see the rest of the year playing out?
So we're quite optimistic. Again, we just had a board meeting yesterday. We're quite optimistic. We have really strong demand signals, as we talked about across our segments. Um, and more than just signals. So we're optimistic. I'll lead with that. The things that make us optimistic are we have customers that are extending their forecast or their PO coverage, their horizon, not just more, but they're extending the horizon of coverage. That's a really strong sign of confidence that they're
Mhm.
confident, for the second half of this year.
Yeah.
And that's actually true across, I'm just thinking before I say, it, yeah, across all three, the big three I talked about. We're seeing that across all three of those. So that gives us confidence. We're watching carefully to see what happens with the USMCA conversations, over the next month or two. Like a lot of things, back to geopolitical, you know, we're not probably overly worried. One of it's out of our control. We can't do anything about it. We can react whenever that becomes something. So we're watching that.
Mhm.
But again, we think we're well positioned with the U.S. and the Mexico footprint, kind of whichever way, if that pendulum moves a little bit, we think we're well positioned to take
Mhm.
care of our partners there. And I think the third thing, the outlook is, the continued strength of AI data centers, all those things, what that does to the supply chain and then what the geopolitical things do to the supply chain. I think that those are things we watch that may change the second half of the year. But right now, we're really optimistic about the second half.
Okay, good. So to circle back where we started, you said
Yeah.
it's been a year and a half now in the position. If we go out, say, 2 years and looking back, what in your mind would success look like for SMTC?
Yeah, so success to me, and I always like to say this. One of the things that attracted me to SMTC, we have our mission, we have our vision, we have our values, and those all matter. I love our purpose. And our purpose is we believe we enhance people's lives and our world every day. So I really think at the end of the day, we build things, but we build things that are really important to the world. And
Mhm.
so part of our success, and we talk about this with our teams, is we don't build widgets. We build things that make the world a better place. They protect the world, they make the world better, they help the warfighter, whatever the case may be. So I think success for us looks like this. We can retain these great partner customers that we have, and we continue our relationships with them.
Mhm.
Um, we have some we're quite excited that we're in the onboarding early phases with now, especially the defense disruptors. I think 2 years from now, I expect that we're gonna be looking at them as long-term relationships that we grow, and they're looking at us the same way. Um, and one of the things I really look at, I back to employee engagement. I think one of the biggest attributes of a company becomes, are we seen as the employer of choice, by our team members in every community where we're doing business? So I'll be looking at that. And then clearly, from the running, we're running a company, we're running a business. We want to continue to grow this company. We want to grow it with very purposely, with very specific partners within those segments that we talk about. So
Mhm.
that's kind of, to me, that's the scorecard as we look at it a year or two from now.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Well, hopefully in a year or so, when I call you again, you'll pick up the phone and and give us an update on that. So,
Eric, I look forward to having the chance to chat with you, and I always enjoy our conversations. I really do.
yeah. No, thank you. I think the audience is going to appreciate this. You've given great insight and the discussion of the overall geopolitical and what we're all, that environment everyone is operating in currently, regardless of industry that they happen to be in. So,
Yes,
um,
sir.
Mike, thank you so much for your time. Look forward to catching up again.
All right. Again, Eric, thank you on behalf of SMTC. Thank you for hearing us today, and it was great chatting with you.
Cheers. Thank you, sir.
Be well.